Okay, now I see it. All right, just
Now
wanted to make sure we were
Thank you.
taking care of that.
Now, everyone that is now watching this, we're recording from this moment going forward. Thank you. And Brandy, are you able to see the recording?
Jennison, you want to hop in?
I just had a quick question, and maybe it's premature, but have any liaisons with the other municipalities in the county been identified, or has that discussion, any discussion about that happened yet?
So the other liaisons at the city right now would be the liaisons that are in place for the Utility Advisory Board, which is Robin Baxley, is my understanding, and then Jim McElroy for the Joint Water and Climate Policy Board.
But representing the other municipalities in the county.
No one from the other municipalities at this
Okay.
Forrest, we can't hear
Well, I will continue to reach out to those municipalities, and I intend to reach out to the Regional Planning Council as well. But with the understanding that oftentimes those municipalities don't have the resources to devote to a specific focus area or topic area like this. Not to say that it's not, yeah, they will be coordinated with, absolutely.
All right. Anybody else have any questions at this point? Nope. All right, Forrest, back to you.
Okay, so that was really actually my technical staff.
Forrest, can you like lean in a little bit? Your audio is kind of wonky.
Is this any better?
A little bit. Actually, it may be your internet. It may be a bandwidth type thing, but you're at least louder.
Okay, there are microphone settings on this as well. If you give me just a second here.
Somehow I think it's related to the mask, but I don't know for sure.
Maybe even closer.
Yeah.
Well, you've been going in and out. Sometimes it's really nice and clear, and then sometimes it's like this.
Yeah, that is not the first time I've heard that comment about Zoom on this laptop. I think it's something that's going on with the laptop. Because I've got this comment in different locations as well. Is that any better?
Kind of. Let's roll with it for now.
I think I need to figure out where exactly the microphone is.
That's good now, actually.
Okay, I think if I aim up right here. Okay, is that better? Okay, I will aim here. Okay, so yes, the very short of it, recap county, city, and GRU, setting aside staff focus areas and are developing tasks for themselves right now for what needs to be addressed in this climate action plan. And they will be reporting back or getting back together in the next month. On the county side, that date for the next meeting is the 18th of February.
So Forrest, I have a question on that one.
Yeah.
How is this all being coordinated? Because we're talking about like staff from the city, from the county, from GRU, and all of that is fantastic. Like, it's wonderful to hear that all of those organizations are putting people on this issue and that all these resources are being made available, but who is directing it so that we're not overlapping efforts? Like, is that supposed to be kind of our role, or is there someone kind of taking the lead on the staff side to do that?
Right now it's me. I'm coordinating that. Yes, I worked in the city planning department for several years and know several staff on GRU side too. So the practical way that has an organic way that's rolled out is that I'm coordinating that. That being said, I am focusing on coordinating the county staff side in that climate planning group that I discussed. And I'm hoping and leaning and turning towards the city staff and GRU staff to organize themselves to some extent. But that being said, I think that this process lends itself to have the citizen input and the technical staff input, and it not necessarily a separate county GRU city staff input. So the technical staff that are working on the city side and the county side are starting to connect with each other and coordinate with each other and attack these focus areas at the same time and together. And that connection, the collaboration and the bringing the people together, right now it's fallen to me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
All right. Is there anything else on this one, on updates?
Yeah, just the utility advisory board and GRU. We've discussed questions to GRU. You all saw the presentation from the joint policy board. The last meeting, we asked for you all to send in questions that you may have as a response for GRU. I have gotten some questions from some of you. I have started to put those questions together in a unified document, and Cayman has been helping out with that as well, as really putting those questions together in a synthesized way. Obviously, we don't want to hit GRU with 9 different sets of questions. We want to put that in front of GRU as one unified voice, and then at the same time sending those questions to the utility advisory board and to their chair. And thank you to Stephen for really taking the lead on that and sending some of the initial questions out to the utility advisory board and looping in Wendell Porter, their chair. So that conversation with the utility advisory board has at least started. I do still want to get the report that the utility advisory board has put out and done. And then I am intending to continue to work with them and their liaison to see what the utility advisory board's response or answers to our questions for GRU are, because I think that they will have, not only will they be able to answer some of those questions, but they will be able to answer them with a perspective from a citizen advisory board, not just, a technical staff or GRU standpoint. So if you all, I did only get questions for GRU from a few CCAC members. If you all have more questions, please send them to me. We are putting them together and putting them out there.
Thanks, Forrest. And thanks, Stephen, for looping in the UAB. They know more about GRU than we do, or than maybe we ever will. So that's great to get their perspective directly on those questions.
And I think it was last time, but just to bring it up again, also for the connection point, of course, one of the county commissioners, Mary Alford, was actively involved with the utility advisory board and the energy report. So just those connections there for you all.
All right. So is that it? Are we good on updates?
I think that's it for me.
All right.
On my updates, unless anyone has any other questions for me.
Do we have any questions, CCAC members? Any questions for Forrest about those updates? Nope. All right.
I'll just throw a quick ad that after the meeting this morning that I had with county staff, staff was excited. And as a government employee, I have to say that's pretty rare to see other government employee excited for what we're doing. So you've got some good backing and you've got some good technical expertise and technical staff that are supporting what you all are doing. It's fun to see.
Noah, go ahead.
I just wanted to acknowledge Stephen, like the word urgency, I feel like is a really important word when we're talking about rationale for why we would be able to even engage GRU, say, in a conversation about changing dramatically the way that they're approaching something. I feel like that was really that's the premise of this whole, that's why we're all here in the first place. And I think that we can't overstate the appropriateness of reassessment of a lot of the things that we've been on track for. And I think that just struck me as like the most, that's the key word here in a lot of what we're going to be trying to do. And I think that when we're talking about why it should make sense for, dramatic shifts, that's really what we're looking at. So I just wanted to appreciate that. So thank you, Stephen.
Yes, thank you. I mean, that's a good reminder, that the science is clearly on our side, and we're going to be asking some tough questions, and we're going to be asking our city, our county, our government, our community to do some things that are going to be difficult and that are going to be different. And it is important to remember the rationale is that we really, at this point, have no choice. Like we have to take action. I see, Stephen, we're all talking about you. You might as well jump in.
My comments will be very brief. I sent some papers forward that do argue for urgency, and those are empirically based. They're not models for the most part. And I think that's an important distinction, that the empirical projections are some of the most dire that we've seen. We're out of time and out of excuses, and certainly urgency is the right word that needs to be conveyed to all groups in the city, in the county, and to GRU. And I think the UAB is clearly on board with that. I do think that there's going to be pushback, but the one thing that I would, the only comment I really want to make is that for all of those groups that you mentioned, Forrest, is that they engage in solid scholarship. And that means like using Google Scholar and searching for the papers that address the issues that you're talking about. I can't emphasize enough, not just to my students, but to those groups that you're referring to, that they fully engage with what is known and find out whose shoulders they're standing on. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you, Stephen. So, Forrest.
Yeah, I just a couple of things I would say. One, just to remind everyone that this is an advisory board, and so there's a lot of power and freedom in that. So, my advice would be, what you all think is the craziest, most outlandish thing, I wouldn't hold back. You are giving the advice. You are advising the decision makers. Very short of it, don't hold back. Look at exactly what you think is the right thing to do. Let the decision makers worry about the politics and the implementation. That's what they're asking you all to do, is go right forward, right into it. And for Stephen, absolutely, I totally agree. I do think that on the staff side, we always need to be reminded to go back to the scholarship and keep going back to the scholarship. But yes, on the same hand, of course, we have some great technical experts on all of our sides that are very highly trained and went through a lot of great programs in scholarship to get to where they are. But of course, that being said, in Gainesville, in Alachua County, we have you all that other communities do not get to have. I tell stories to my family that live in other places that you might go to Starbucks or your fast food place or getting tacos, and that person is way more educated than you are in this town, in this area. So even for us, for technical staff, it's important for us to listen to everyone, to listen to you all at all times, because we're covered in academics and covered in scholars in this area.
Thank you, Forrest. Do we have any other comments on this topic before we move on? Nope. All right. Our next agenda item is scheduling the second monthly workshop, which this is technically the second monthly workshop. We did it on Thursday just because that date had worked kind of for the other meeting, but I realize that's not necessarily true going forward indefinitely. So Forrest has sent out a doodle poll. Please fill that out. Hope in the next week or so, that'll give us, well, like in the next week. That way we'll have plenty of time to get the next meeting noticed. And that doodle poll is just looking for which day of the week is going to be best for you for this, essentially this meeting. So in, a month from now, what date are we going to be, or what day of the week are we going to be looking for?
We've got 7 people at least have already responded, and the most popular response is Monday.
All right. Well, I'm one of the ones who hasn't. Monday's fine. But I will officially fill out the doodle poll.
So, we can't vote or anything like that, but I think I can move forward with, certainly with the feedback that's been given so far on the Monday. My only caveat, I would say, to not finalize it yet, because I want to check on my side to make sure there are no other meetings or conflicts that I'm not thinking of right now. But also just to throw back to you all to discuss if you need to. Of course, if we have that Thursday meeting, then that will be a Friday and then a full week, and then the Monday will be the meeting. So just for your own planning, what you think might be effective and efficient, kick that around.
Yeah, we're talking more like a week and a half rather than a full 2 weeks in between. I mean, what do you all think about that? See one thumbs up. Anybody else have thoughts on the fact that it won't be a full 2 weeks? It'll be kind of a quick turnaround. Christine says yes. Okay. Stevens, yes.
Then we have longer on the other side. So, I
Yeah.
mean, we'll have one long stretch and one not as long stretch. So I think it should shake out either way.
All right.
What
I'm
I'm
okay.
guessing will likely happen is that you all may decide that those second meetings are better for the subgroups or for your team meetings. And then there will be, a smaller group of people that are meeting on that date.
Sounds good. John, did you have something? I think
No,
we
I'm
got audio crossed.
No, I'm okay. It'll work for me also, Wendy.
All right. Well, Forrest, it looks like everyone is good with Mondays.
I will.
Unofficially.
Yeah. I'll run that through and confirm it. I'll send that confirmation out as soon as possible so you guys can get it all on your calendar. It will likely, the way that you'll see it is that there will be some Zoom cancellations, and then you'll get a new invite with new links for that second meeting date and things like that. So just be aware of that. Keep an eye on that. If you are wondering or confused about the links that are going out, just ask me, and I probably will have a good hold of it.
All right, sounds good. All right. Wow, this was going fast, everybody. So our sixth and biggest agenda item is really getting into the meat of this process for doing the climate action plan. So I feel like we've been working up to this whole time, and now we're going to finally hash it out and figure out how we're going to do what we're going to do. So one of I guess we'll go in order. The first bullet was to discuss the CAP process proposal. So I created this proposal after that meeting with the Joint Policy Board. So I looked at everything that we CCAC members had said was important to us and how we really wanted to proceed and what we wanted to prioritize for the Climate Action Plan, and then took the Joint Water and Climate Policy Board's feedback and incorporated that in and tried to come up with a balance of what we as a CCAC, what we as a committee really want to do and how we want to focus our effort and how we want to prioritize our work, but also respecting that we ultimately, are answerable to the Joint Policy Board. We are there to advise them. So we need to respect and give them basically the sort of information that they're looking for so that they can go forward and make the decision that is their charge. So has everybody had a chance to look at that document, to read it through? The idea here, by the way, is we can't vote on this, and I didn't intend this to be like an up-down sort of thing. This is just to kind of give us a starting point for something that does in at least one way of balancing what the Joint Policy Board is looking for with what we as a committee consider to be important. So I'm looking for feedback on that. I mean, this is really just a way to open up the discussion and figure out how we want to structure the climate action plan. Because one of the major pieces of feedback from the Joint Policy Board is that they want something that is discrete and actionable. They are not looking for like one long document that is delivered to them, 12 months down the line. They really want updates as regularly as possible. So as soon as we are able to come up with, to examine some, a climate change impact and come up with advice, they would like to have that advice. So, yeah, I'm opening the floor up. This is supposed to be a conversation, really. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, critiques?
Yeah, so something that we did on the county side was just that. So for even across departments, one of the, for the vulnerability analysis that we discussed, we have a stormwater engineer that's in EPD, and we have engineers that are in public works that have broad experience for floodplain management and things like that, while discussing what needs to be done in a climate action plan. Of course, the broad goal of floodplain management and flooding and stormwater came up. Those two engineers now are on their own team and are making their own tasks for the next approach or the next thing that they think is appropriate for the climate action plan.
Yeah, so we have kind of, honestly, this bullet, this agenda item has multiple components. So there's the proposal is more about the structure of the climate action plan, but we also are going to be talking about how we want to divvy up into teams. We had talked about and presented to the Joint Policy Board the idea of breaking up into at least two teams or two working groups, one that is focused more on communications and engagement and outreach to the community, and another that is more in sort of a technical advising role in terms of doing the research to provide the staff, basically, I mean, kind of to Stephen's point, to be this backup on the literature searches, and then being able to bring that to staff to help guide them. So we have sort of I'm a kind of a space nerd, right? So in my head, I call them Capcom and like Cap Tech. But anyway, that's a little inside joke. And if nobody knows anything about Apollo, that's not funny, except to me. Yeah, so like two groups basically, communications and then kind of a technical group. If anybody has a suggestion for, if you think that we need a third, we can talk about that too. But that was part of this whole thing. It's sort of what's the structure of the CAP, and then what is our organizational structure in terms of how we're going to go about doing this work. Yeah, a lot of folks have their hands up. So let's go. I think Stephen, Christine, Noah. So let's go in that order.
Okay, I'll be very brief. The main thing, there are 2 points I'd like to make about the proposed process. One is we should have some process for incorporating blue sky suggestions. For example, a recent article in Science highlighted how you can use manufacturing and construction materials and convert them into materials that have sequestered atmospheric carbon. This is far more environmentally friendly than building huge fans and amines chemicals to capture this very rare gas out of the atmosphere, which the fossil fuel companies just love this plan. It gives them time to continue what they're doing. But however, if we were to develop a blue sky project like that, someone on the engineering side who could work through some of that scholarship and actually make a proposal, it could result in significant cash flow for the county and the city, and could help fund a lot of the exercises that we're engaged in. The other thing I'll say in general about the entire document is it is highly bureaucratic, which is exactly what you would expect. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, I look at it and I think there's an enormous amount of boxes to check and people to check in with and processes to go through. I think in an overarching sense, what we need is the ability to craft an emergency climate document that is more than simply a declaration, which the city put forward and the county has in its own form put forward. We need more than a declaration. We need a climate emergency plan that identifies our priorities for taking care of the region as climate change begins to unfold and becomes more and more urgent in demanding a response. For example, where would food security fall in the current planning that we have in the CAP proposed based on the JWCP feedback? I thoroughly agree with the document that's been put forward. I don't have any problem with it. I recognize that it has to be bureaucratic per force. There's no way around that. But I also think there should be a parallel project of some kind that actually is geared toward immediacy and the fact that we're running out of time, and that much of what could happen to North Central Florida in the next 2 to 3 decades may not be addressed in revisions of the comprehensive plans. And that's what I'm seeing in the first paragraph, is incorporate into current policy analysis. Well, a lot of the current policy analysis, I'll be frank, I'd like to throw out the window. I'd like to start again from ground zero. But I realize that's unrealistic. And so a climate emergency document that actually lays out priorities for how we respond under various conditions. It's an action reaction and proactive adaptation document, which is far less expensive than reactive adaptation. Okay, I think that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And then maybe if that was your impression, then I must not have done a very good job on this document, because my goal here was to do kind of what you're talking about. Like at the very bottom for next steps, you know, we need to prioritize expected climate change impacts based on immediacy and severity. And so the idea here is, you know, the Joint Policy Board says they want these pieces quickly. So what I was proposing here is that we as a committee come up with a list of what those prioritized items are. What are the most immediate impacts? What are the most immediate, most severe impacts? And that's what we start on. And that's what we try to get them first. And then we move through. So, based on those priorities, and we take one chunk. I don't think it necessarily has to be one at a time. I think honestly, we have the ability to do several in parallel, but the idea is to address them based on their prioritization and send it on to the Joint Policy Board as soon as it's completed. So that we're not sitting around and waiting around on some large document. But if that wasn't clear, then my apologies. That was what I described now was the intent.
No, it actually is clear. I'm just re-emphasizing it. I apologize for any implied criticism.
No, criticism is good. We need criticism. This was not meant to be like, this is meant to be criticized. This is meant for us to talk about and to hone. If people, if you guys think that this is a terrible idea and you want to eject it, that is also fine. This is a starting point for us. It's one possibility. So I appreciate the comments and the critiques, and I apologize if I did not do a good enough job of emphasizing that the first steps, at least, in this proposal, would be based on what is most immediate and most severe, and that we tackle that first. Jenison, please go ahead.
Thanks. So this is, I'm just going to throw it out there because we have to, why not, right? So the way I'm thinking about this is like, I feel like we need a parallel organizational strategy for mobilization. Like we need climate mobilization teams, at the community scale who are enacting these recommendations in real time and in dynamic ways. Like I'm not an expert in community organizing, but I think we need to come back to those principles of, that have driven fundamental change, from the grassroots up, and approach it from that lens in parallel to the scholarship, like making sure the scholarship matches the mobilization that we are trying to catalyze effectively here. So I'm not sure how we do that, but I think like that's the vision, is like if we can quickly address that urgency by distilling and identifying the most important action priorities, but at the same time building this community of people throughout the county who are like at the ready to mobilize and begin action and put pressure, on policymakers. And I don't know, I just think others can add, but I just wanted to throw that out there as something to think about, how we can make that become concrete.
Thank you, Jenison. I see Hannah and Christine who may be replying to you, and Noah. All right, Hannah, Christine, Noah. Hannah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was replying to Janice, and I think that's an excellent idea, and something I've been really impressed with in some other cities and counties' climate action plans has been kind of the creation or like the fostering of, I think they've, like some places have been calling them like climate equity fellowships or environmental justice fellows, basically setting up kind of training programs for people who are, community members who might not have like, had the same level of formal kind of academic training as you might like as others, whatever. Basically giving them like, education and background in some of the more like sciencey topics, but people who are like super engaged with the community, who know how to talk about these sorts of issues, who sort of act as like mediators between the government and community. So I think, that could be something really interesting. It's a bit of a larger project to take on, I suppose, getting like the funding and everything for that, and actually like, yeah, instituting a training process. But in any case, yeah, really like that suggestion, Jennison. And I have more comments on the on your document too, but I'm gonna hold those until the end, I think.
Okay. Christine?
Yeah, I also, Jennison, like what you're saying. And I think that while I understand that the recommendation was for this to be primary our audience to be the policy decision makers, I really feel like there are other audiences, and what you're talking about is looking at other audiences that this should be going towards. And there are completely different ways to approach those audiences. The initial effort is for decision makers, and that is absolutely critical, but the general public and others are really important too. I also have comments on the structure, but I'll hold those.
Thank you, Christine. Noah, and then I see John. Noah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the things that have been said about the fellowship. I thought that was a good idea as well. But I guess I just wanted to harp back on what I feel like. Actually, real quick, Forrest, Nancy Darren was asking if you could let her into the meeting, so I was gonna pipe up for her. But I wanted to harken back to something I had been meditating on back in our first or second meetings, which was I really am convinced that incentivization is basically the most compelling way to get people to change their actions. And I think no matter how much kind of outreach we do, that will remain basically the main determinant of whether we're able to create mechanisms for these policy changes that we want to see. I think that, essentially the proof is in the pudding in terms of for people to see something as worth doing. It takes a lot from the emotional side or the intellectual side. It takes a lot less from the pocketbook side, and I think that we just should see that as a tool, not necessarily as like a limiting phenomena, but I feel like more as like our most useful tool in a way in terms of having access to policymaking. So I guess I just want to kind of say that again, I guess, is that I really think what we need to do is look at the mechanisms of incentivization that we can kind of attach each of these things, that priorities that we create for ourselves, that we're going to try to convince other people to adopt as their both ideals and their actions. I think we have to look at that through incentivization and disincentivization, I guess, just as the obvious other side of it.
Thank you very much, Noah. John, you're up.
No, I agree with you that incentivization is the way to do it. But incentivization can be education too. Just making sure that people understand what they're benefiting from once they're being educated a little bit more, the bigger picture. So also I want to just get an understanding that when we talk about getting the community involved and we talk about how we do that versus what we're doing with the policymakers, do we have to wait until we get an okay with the policymakers before we go and start to get the community involved in something? So I'm not quite sure about that, whether or not we have to make sure that certain parts of our plan has been accepted. before we start to engage community in this?
That's a good question. Forrest, I'm going to toss that to you. I think the answer is no, we don't have to ask permission, but I'm not the authority on that. Forrest, you are muted.
That is almost always my answer is no, you don't have to ask permission. You're the citizens. That's my answer to that. You're the citizens. The policy board and the commissioners empowered this group, the advisory committee, but you are all citizens. So
Okay.
the way that you approach this, of course, you know, if you want your ideas and your goals to be incorporated into concrete policy and decision-making in code, then that is one approach, and maybe that's one set of products that you have, but that doesn't mean, you know, don't talk to the public or don't also work with other groups or don't put those ideas out to other agencies, people, or organizations that you think will also take off with this. I don't, you know, you shouldn't limit yourselves for solving the problem by being a part of this group. This group should be facilitating you solving the problem in an additional way to the decision and policymakers, and does not restrict you from connecting with other organizations that are outside of that policy structure.
Good answer.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to do the two teams that I proposed, but my idea with the communications group was that they'll do basically what you all were talking about. Like, going out and getting not necessarily just educating the community, but getting their feedback, asking what are their priorities, what are they worried about, what are they concerned about now, how can those concerns, or how will those concerns likely be made worse with a changing climate, working with those groups to empower them to go out and advocate for themselves, to advocate for, you know, some of the policies or the projects that we, you know, come up with and they shape, you know. I mean, I guess Forrest has told us, right? Like the sky's the limit, kind of. We're only limiting ourselves. So yeah, I mean, I see Hannah and Jennison and Megan Innes all have their hands up. Are these fresh hands or are these, okay, I see Megan is nodding. Yes. Okay, so I think it was Jennison, Hannah, and then Megan. So Jennison, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll keep it short. So an idea kind of building off of this conversation, and no, I agree completely, like those incentives, if the incentives aren't there, it doesn't matter how well we think up all these ideas for mobilization, like we're not going to get the critical mass we need, and, you know, with the urgency we have right now. So, and one idea maybe the communications group could work on is putting together the proposal that the cities and counties could submit to somebody who wants to give lots of money to our community to mobilize people, and essentially frame it as like, these are our frontline, you know, public defenders. Essentially, they're our frontline, the community members who recognize the urgency and want to act and have that organizing capacity need to have that status, status and incentivization to act, right? And so maybe we can be a catalyst for helping organize that or bring resources in that would enable us to kind of elevate the importance of this kind of action among citizens to the same role as these frontline, you know, first responders to other crises and disasters that we face. Just a thought. So something we could be doing, so we could say, hey, you know, put together what that would actually look like if we were able to get that kind of funding and support from the county and policymakers to put it forth and make it happen. That's all.
Thanks, Jenison. Well, I mean, we get to advise, right? That can be our advice. Our advice can be, we need this sort of organization, and we need help to make it happen. Hannah.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to first say that I did like your proposal to split the committee up a little bit. I think the one thing I said, and I might have said it in one of our past meetings as well, is that I'd like the boundaries between the two to be a little bit fuzzy, just so that if people are working on the communications team, they can still like help out in one specific focus area that they feel like they could really contribute to. And I wanted to like quickly comment on the incentives discussion. Maybe I'm just not understanding what y'all are meaning. But I guess that for me, I kind of like, I like the stick a bit more than I like the carrot. At least I believe in it more so. I mean, we've had 20 years, right, of like, of claiming that incentives will like solve environmental crises, will solve the climate crisis. And like, that's like not happening. Like it needs to be done through policy. I mean, I'm not saying like exclusively. Maybe I'm just seeing this like too black and white right now. But if y'all want to give me some examples by what you mean by the incentives, I'd be interested to know more. And then I wanted to comment on the like scoring idea that you had basically with the resilience, equity, and emissions. I thought that was excellent. And there's like a few cities as well that have really cool like equity scorecards. I think Boston was one that I really liked. So maybe like something that could be something that say the communications like working group could be tasked with, is kind of just clearing it up so that, you know, how do we define whether equity is high, medium, or low, or the emissions, resilience, et cetera. And then last thing, I was interested to hear more about, and this might have been something that you just kind of like wrote down, but you had kind of suggested adding an extra chapter on like drawdown and net zero. I personally am a little uncomfortable with the wording, and this isn't the time to go into a long discussion about that, but I also was a little confused too, because let me pull it up there. Yeah, you said like it could also include solutions that might not fit into the other chapters. So you had like GRU, Renewable Portfolio Standard, which I feel like could just go into energy. Electric vehicles could just go into transit, waste reduction programs, could go into like circular economy or something. So if you had anything else to say about that, I'd be interested to like learn a little bit more about what you meant there. But overall, I thought the document was like really excellent, and yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, so I'm not married to any of the language in there. It literally, it was after the Joint Policy Board discussion. I like, you know how like you're making dinner and suddenly ideas start to come, and then you burn your dinner because you're writing it down. Like that was basically what this was. So I don't consider this a final form. This is a draft to talk about. But sort of my vision for the CAP was that the chapters wouldn't necessarily be like the traditional chapters that you see where it's like climate, energy, waste. It would be based on impacts. So one of the bigger impacts for us here will be changes in the frequency and intensity of storms. So that would be, the chapter would be kind of the climate impact. So changes to extreme rainfall, and then that chapter will deal with sort of building out our stormwater infrastructure, looking at green spaces that'll work as like a retention pond and overflow, looking at ecosystems and ecosystem services for say wetlands and that sort of thing. So it would be more structured based on the impact, since the Joint Policy Board is looking more for like what is going to be most immediate now. So like what impacts are going to be most immediate for Gainesville. We know flooding is a problem during storms, so that's why I picked that one off the top. But so I put that last chapter in because if we go specifically impact by impact, I don't know for sure that we would be able to address sort of that net zero or that drawdown comprehensively. So that final chapter would be a place just to sort of combine the strategies that have already come up as part of other mitigation, not necessarily just mitigation, but the way that we address other impact, but gives us a chance to go a little further. So if we don't have the chance based just on impact, if maybe an impact is, summers are going to be hotter, electricity, demand is going to go up. So one of the components of electricity demand going up will be that, people may not be able to afford their electric bill, so we can touch on GRU and those components, but it's just a chance really to address the emissions thing, right? It's a way to address emissions head on directly, and is also a way really, another reason I put it in there was to balance, because on this committee we have a really big focus on, and I know we've talked about the language, like mitigation versus adaptation, and not really liking that language, but just for the sake of being clear here and drawing a distinction, is that our focus is more on adaptation and really ensuring the resilience of our community. But we also have talked about how important it is to really address the fact that these climatic changes are being driven by greenhouse gas emissions. And so I also want there to be a component of our climate action plan that does address that causal factor head on. So that was why that was in there, and that's kind of what I was going for. I don't know if that's super clear or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that really cleared things up for me. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I think for me too, I would just like sort of like the language of drawdown or net zero kind of alludes to like carbon sequestration in a sense, right? Like balancing things out. Whereas like the solutions that you've presented in that, like the examples, those are just emissions reductions. So you could call it something more along the lines of like high impact emissions reduction strategies, which I'd be more comfortable with. But no, thank you. That explanation makes a lot of sense.
Sounds good. Okay, yeah, I use drawdown because there's a project drawdown that's about really getting to net zero. So that's where I took that language from. But yeah, I'm not married to the language. If there's something that's more clear and that doesn't have baggage, because no, I'm not talking about sequestration. Like really talking more about emissions reduction directly. And then you had asked about incentives, and I think Noah, do you or Jennison want to answer Hannah on that one? No.
Sure.
Noah, you can go first.
Okay.
Gentlemen first.
Okay, so that Hannah, I guess in a way, like that's part of why I said disincentivization as well at the end, is because I feel like it's really both. It's when you're talking about a carrot and a stick, and I feel like incentivization works in both directions in my mind. And so I think a while back I'd mentioned the example of like land use. So if you have, for example, large tracts of land, like the most common uses for them in Alachua County probably is pine forests and cows, right? In terms of agriculture, because it's taxes. That's the reasons that people have those uses on their land, is not because they really love cows. It's because that's an easy way to get a agricultural exemption on their taxes. And the same thing with pines. Like, it's not good for hardly anything. There is, some amount of carbon sequestration that happens there, but it's a barren habitat and whatnot. And so why are they growing pines? Not because they're going to build a whole bunch of stuff with it, or they have a love for pine trees, or they like walking in them. It's because they have a tax incentivization to do that. And to me, that's just the clearest example of, when we look at our total land mass in Alachua County, most of the reason that most of the places are being used the way that they are being used is because of incentivization in one direction or another. So whether you're talking about wetlands being conserved, or you're talking about pine forests being grown, or cattle, or hay. It's like, that's the massive amount of land use is really in either development or agriculture, right? And when we're talking about climate change, I feel like that's super important to consider how we are going to use our land. So that's just one example, I guess. But I guess, does that make any more sense in terms of you're both incentivizing, but you're also disincentivizing? And I mean, I could create more examples, but I feel like so the feed-in tariff, so the solar feed-in tariff program, that alone was responsible for basically making solar visible in Alachua County, right? That was an incentivization. That when you coupled that with the federal incentives that existed at the time of 30% tax credit, otherwise nobody would have done that, except for a handful of folks, in terms of putting the capital up front to put solar on the roofs. So I guess that's what I'm talking about. And it's taxes. It's I mean, a lot of it's taxation, and then you couple that with gosh, I don't know, on your GRU bill, you pay more money for energy use at a certain time of day, right? Or water use at over a certain amount, that kind of thing. That's all, in my mind, part of that same boat of what I have in mind, I guess. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate you throwing out some examples. It helps me understand a little bit more of what you're talking about. So, and yeah, I mean, like the solar feed-in tariff program, for example, one incentive program I could get behind. It hasn't been very accessible to the vast majority of people here, and all renters, obviously. But yeah, you're right. No, there's definitely some ways in which incentives can be used. I did make it quite black and white in my mind. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and if I may too, like I guess I wanted to relate this in a way to, I feel like as a farmer I'm really constantly trying to convince people to eat locally, right? And that, I feel like I align myself more naturally with the messaging part of things, with the appealing to people's emotional and intellectual awareness around issues and to make decisions from. But I'm also acutely aware that even when I go to the grocery store, in the end, like I'm going to couple that with the financial reality of things. And so I feel like I'm not saying like we should somehow set aside the outreach and the messaging part. I'm just saying, I think ultimately incentivization is extremely fundamental to people's decision making in the end.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Hannah. Stephen, I see your hand up. Megan has been waiting very patiently. So we'll have Megan and then Stephen, and then Noah, your hand is up. Did you have something new to add or no? Okay, so Megan and then Stephen, please. Thank you.
And then I think John wanted to say something after Stephen as well. So I just wanted to bring up a few things based on these conversations and remind everybody that part of the research I do is on how do we communicate climate change to people and what are the effective ways to do this. And I've been involved in this research for a decade now. And one of the things, and Noah, you brought up some really good examples, but those are all based on like the politician side of things and things that individual people don't really have a lot of agency about because we can't change the tax laws ourselves or whatever. So those are really important things for us to talk about on the politics side of things. But when we talk to people, the research shows, unfortunately, that crisis messaging and appealing to people's wallets don't really make long-term changes. So we are obviously going to need a wide range of strategies, which we've all been talking about. And so I just wanted to just make a plug to remind everybody that there's really great research out there on how do we get communities engaged in this kind of things, and how do we talk to them in ways that make them want to engage and take agency for their community and the health and well-being of their family for the long term. And so I don't have much to add at this current point, other than I think bringing in the communities, talking with them from the very beginning will be so important for making sure that we are addressing these issues in ways that are really applicable for the people who are living them, and not just what we at the university think they should be doing or anything to that effect. So as we move forward, if there is interest, I'm happy to put together some materials and even a crash course on how do we have these kinds of conversations in ways that are productive. So as we're moving forward, I don't think that's something we need to worry about this week or in the next couple of weeks, but in the not too distant future, I think could potentially be useful for all of us to have some conversations around productive climate messaging. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And yeah, I think we'll take you up on that. Let's see, Stephen, and then John, and then Jennison. And Christine, I saw your hand go up and then go down. You're in the queue? Okay. All right, so Stephen, John, Jennison, Christine. All right, Stephen, please go ahead.
Yeah, Megan spoke exactly to what I wanted to talk about, that there are professionals out there that understand how to communicate on climate change, and we need to use them. Now, Megan's faculty, and she's probably oversubscribed by a factor of 3. So perhaps, Megan, you could advise us on where to get an external resource that is good at this. I know Susan Hassel's group has recommendations, but I don't know that they're the best. There's a couple of lessons that I've learned in my outreach career. I served the Christ administration. I went on to become a college president. I did a lot of stuff in the public eye, and my entire gig was climate change. I was focused on it the whole time. So I learned by the seat of the pants how to communicate and how not to communicate. And the one thing that I think is really crucial is that we get professional advice for how to do it. And I think you should, given your area of expertise, if you're willing, you should be the person that tells us whose door to go knock on. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Jennison, please go ahead.
John, were you
Okay,
before
John,
me?
sorry, you're next. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Zoom puts the people who have
It's hard.
hands up
Yeah.
on the front. I'm sorry. Yes, please go ahead.
Now, I wanted to echo the value of incentivizing, but not necessarily incentivizing from a financial. There's also a lot to be said from incentivizing by giving recognition. I worked during the era of the early 80s where we were incentivizing with the utilities with energy conservation. And we had to basically show a customer how investing more in the beginning would come out better for them in the end. And we did something called a Wattwise home. And it was a situation where we encouraged developers to build incentive energy conservation homes by putting plaques in front of the homes and giving a value to that. And I see that maybe we could incentivize customers that did climate change actions by recognizing them with some kind of community recognition. And hey, my neighbor got one of these. What did he do to get it? And I know that that worked very well in the Wattwise home concept with developers. They actually use that to as a incentive to sell from some of the homes. So a lot of this concept of selling where you give up something in terms of being recognized for something makes a lot of sense, as we did with the energy conservation movement.
Thank you, John. Jennison and then Christine, please.
Yeah, so I had a couple things. One, just starting off of John's comment, the incentivization, and Hannah, to your question too. I was just wanted to emphasize that, when at least when I use the term incentive, and so many people, it's like it's two sides of the same coin. So for every incentive, there's a disincentive. And one of the things that one of the studies I worked on for the state years ago was looking at the split incentive, it's called, in rental housing in Florida. And so, tenants have no incentive to save energy or to invest in energy efficiency because they don't, or they have the incentive to invest, but they don't have the ownership of the property. And the owners have no incentive to invest because they're not paying the utility bills, essentially. So you have these conflicting incentives that result in widespread, energy inefficiency and waste. And so looking at how you can decouple or separate and closely align those incentives in ways that just make it natural. It makes it natural behavior to respond in a way that benefits both the tenants and the environment and their pocketbooks. And so some of that local governments have control over, but not a lot of it. And so, like, when we did this study, it was for the Office of Energy for Florida, and we made recommendations to the commissioner, about what to do. And they were ready to put a little bit of money in, but not much. And so a couple projects came out, doing retrofits of apartment buildings. But at the end of the day, it's what the local governments, how they can eliminate those split incentives. And there are creative ways that they can do that. So we do have a lot of amazing resources here who can help guide us on what we can do locally. And I know there was a push years ago for an energy conservation ordinance modeled after the city of Boulder, and there's some other cities that have done this and been able to kind of decouple those things. So that's just one thing. And Megan, it's so exciting to have you on this team and have us as the expert for the climate communications. But I wanted to also recommend Anne Cristiano in the Center for Public Interest Communications and the work she's done on climate change messaging and framing. And then something optimistic that I've seen, and that most of you have probably seen, the global warming, the 6 Americas of global warming that the Yale Center for Climate Communications has done. When they did their national survey in 2020, that segment of the alarmed, these 6 segments of the American population are shifting from the dismissive and the deniers to 30% now being either alarmed or and engaged. And so recognizing we have to frame carefully for different audiences, it's also encouraging that at least more people are at least recognizing the realities and the urgency of the situation. I was going to say one other thing, but I can't remember what it is now. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thanks, Jennison. Raise your hand again if there's.
Oh, I know what it was. It was the drawdown comment, and I mentioned this in a previous meeting, but I've had a couple of conversations with the Project Drawdown. I forget what, she's the engagement director for Project Drawdown, and she said how they do the science and the scholarship of what solutions work, but at the end of the day, what they want to support is helping communities translate that to action, to actually reduce the emissions and increase sequestration and get us closer to drawdown and net zero. So, and again, we know it's got to be this community and the resources here, but maybe that's an asset or potentially a partner we could engage to help us, you know, connect the two, connect that scholarship of drawdown to that action plan.
Thank you, Jennison. Christine, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. I had a couple of points I wanted to make, and one was with the incentives. Noah, I think you make complete sense and with that aspect of incentives. I think, especially since we're talking about working with communities outside of obviously Gainesville, outside of Alachua County, and hoping that this will be something that they want to work with as well. I think when you're talking about incentives related to land use, tax basis is huge. I see it not only in how our lands are used, but also how things are developed. Just look at Midtown, look at downtown, look at how things are developing. That's completely, well, a lot of it is being done based on incentives, and a lot of it is being done based on what can happen and how it should happen. And I would love it if we could be looking at trying to encourage green building, trying to encourage thinking when these things are being developed, thinking of climate change and have it be integrated into all of these decision making, from materials that are being chosen to how land parcels are being developed to how things are being torn down, built back up, et cetera. I think all of that is really important, because currently things are operating in this county and in surrounding counties based on that and based on tax incentives. The other comment I wanted to make, and this kind of goes back to where Hannah was touching on, is in the structure of the CAP. We talk about resilience, equity, emissions, et cetera. I would like to encourage having a level of practicality built into there. I'd really like to see, in addition to these solutions, talking about these really important factors to have, because if this is going to decision makers, they're going to want to know brass tacks. And so having in there built in something that rates cost, high, medium, or low, or whatever our scale is, impact. Is whatever this solution is does it have a narrow impact? Does it go wider, or is it something like a medium impact? So how far, if you make the solution, what's the cost? How far does the impact spread? And then timeline for implementation. Is this a short-term win? Is this a medium term, or is this something that's long and systemic in our decision making and in the solutions? And then the third, and I apologize for jumping all around here, but the third is, Megan, I really appreciate what you said, and I appreciate your expertise, and I think this is great. And one of the things you all asked us to do was talk about where we wanted to be supporting when we go forward with the CAP. And I will throw all of my energy into supporting with the communications, and to Megan supporting you in whatever you need. So that's where my expertise will come in. And I just wanted to put that's where I'd be happy to help out. So thanks.
Thank you, Christine. And I really like that suggestion about, I don't know if we want to call it practicality, although it actually describes exactly what it is, but like implementation considerations or something along those lines. Because yeah, if we send this on to people who are actually charged with making a decision about whether or not to implement it, they are going to want to know these things, and they're going to want to know that we have thought about these things. Yeah, and if I could say one more comment, I've worked on a couple of documents related to this, one being on wildfire and wildfire prevention and resilience. And one of the things when I met with decision makers all across Florida, and one of the things they said was, this is great, I love your plans, but I have to know how this works, how quickly this will work, and financial impacts. So in order for them to actually do things that impacted or that were important in their community, they need to know those things. Thank you. Yeah, that's great feedback. So Christine kind of moved us naturally onto the next question, which was about the teams, and I want to make sure that we get there. I want to kind of wrap up this conversation about the proposal itself and kind of get everybody's feedback on, are you all on board with an approach that looks at specific impacts? So, and I'm calling it a chapter, but you know, in order to get something to the Joint Policy Board, that we look at specific impacts and discuss the, you know, the ways that we can address those particular impacts. Is that an approach that we all are comfortable with proceeding in that way? John?
I am. I think that we also have to remember how the policy board is looking at things. From they're kind of looking at them from an individual impact standpoint, from how they're starting to research things. So I think that if we can do it that way, individual impacts would make a lot of sense in alignment.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to assume silence is okay. So then we can talk about and we can work through the rest of the details later. I just, you know, the next step, honestly, for this is that kind of our homework would be for us each to go home and make a list of what we think are the top 3 sort of priorities based on the immediacy of the impacts and the severity. So what 3 things, what 3 climate change impacts do you think that we need to address first? And then at our next meeting, we have a conversation and we whittle that down. I would propose that we want to get it to a top 5, and that's how we start on this. We have 5 things and we move with them. Does that plan sound good?
Yes.
All right, Noah?
I guess I'm trying to make a distinction. I guess basically we're talking about like kind of large categories, like when Hannah, you were talking about like transit, or I mean I guess so Megan, you're proposing we organize by impact. So in that case, I guess give me just an example. Yeah.
So an example would be, we know that we are, you know, increasing frequency and severity of storms. So increase in heavy rainfall events, or, you know, increased temperatures. You know, increased temperatures are going to impact the amount of energy we use. It's going to affect the cost for individuals to pay their utility bills. It's going to impact, you know, the heat island effect. It's going to impact workers who work outside. It's going to impact agriculture. So that you're really focused on what we know from, you know, the climate research. What are these things that we are expecting to happen here, and then what is that going to mean for us as a community? You know, in-migration would be another one. So we know that sea levels are going to rise. We are going to expect migration from the coast. We're going to expect more people to be moving to this community. So what does that mean in terms of how we plan, in terms of our transportation infrastructure, in terms of our water and utilities, in terms of how we plan to accommodate that influx of people in a way that makes sense from a sort of a smart planning perspective, that sort of thing. So it's more concrete climate impact, and then what is that like impact, you know, how does that affect everything else? Does that
yeah, it's an interesting thing to like think about. Then we'll end up with this like Venn diagram kind of situation where there's like, you know, one thing has one named impact has this radiating, you know, circle around it of all the things that then that kind of involves or requires the attention toward policy toward, and then that's going to end up brushing up against these other things too. So I think in a way that'll be a clarifying exercise, and ultimately, hopefully. So
well,
yeah, that's helpful.
My thought is that well, what I anticipate is that so say for stormwater, or for increased,
Right.
frequency and intensity of rainfall, the solutions to that are going to end up being solutions for other things that we look at. So at first it's going to look like all of these separate pieces, but we're going to realize that the same solution is going to be a solution for multiple different problems. So I think it's going to look kind of messy at first, but I have a feeling that it's going to start to come together as we move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe not even solution, but impact and then approach. So, increased severity of, intensity of storm events is going to have an effect on affordable housing in a way. It's also going to have an effect on agriculture and urban agriculture and our food systems. So I think that's, a very short idea of the breakout here. We have an idea of the immediate projections for what's going to happen. What does that look like for all of our individual focus areas? And what are the things that we are going to advise the decision makers to do to address those impacts?
All right, I see Christine and Hannah both have hands raised.
My quick comment on that is I think that's a great idea. And if we chunked it into short-term, midterm, long-term impacts from that, and that could prioritize our approaches.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Hannah?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting idea. It's going to take me a little while to wrap my head around. So I had one question for you, because I'm still trying to think this through entirely. What about something like transportation? How would we fit that into an impact area? How could we present, increasing public transportation as a solution for flooding or heat? And then the whole topic of energy as well. I don't know how we can, this is totally for next meeting.
No, but that's what that last chapter is about.
I'm a tiny bit confused. I'm wondering, I understand now that this is why you had that, final sort of chapter proposed for things that wouldn't easily fit into these impact areas. But I feel like that would be a lot to put into one full section or chapter or whatever we want to call it. What are your thoughts on those issues?
I think that increasing public transit will fit into other ideas, right? So if we're talking about in-migration, we're not going to want to build a lot of roads. We are going to want to shift people to using public transit rather than driving single occupancy vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk about increasing infrastructure for, say, flooding, it makes a lot more sense to maybe do. So this is I don't know, it's kind of getting late for story time, but there are things that that buses can do that single occupancy vehicles can't do. I mean, there are other reasons to encourage and shift transportation to say public transit. And part of that honestly will end up being or could end up being from an emissions reduction standpoint. So part of it can go into that final chapter, but that was also the other reason that I suggested essentially tagging these solutions so that you can see how they all kind of fit together. But I don't think that everything will end up in that final chapter. I think that there are lots of other reasons why we would want to encourage people to use public transit. But I think that going through the exercise of asking that question why is going to be important for how we present it to policymakers and also how we present it to the community. We're not saying we want to increase public transit because that's what we're supposed to do. We're going to present it, this is why, this is the impact on the community, and this is why this is an important way to reduce that impact and make us all more resilient.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking, air pollution, I'm definitely getting really on board with this framing. It makes a lot of sense, especially for the policymakers too. I mean, because it's so hard to argue that we need to reduce our emissions for one tiny little city, right? But if we frame it in terms of the impacts and how it helps build resilience, I think it's excellent. So yeah, thanks.
it helps me. It really helps me to actually to answer questions too. You're helping me change my thinking, and everybody's making this idea a whole lot better.
I
So
don't want to
think-
jump the line, but it's directly related to this, just
Sure, go for it.
to make sure it's a question. So when you ask us to share impacts, are you talking about climate change impacts that are happening or about solutions that would have the most
And yeah, so
scalable impacts in positive terms?
specifically climate change impacts. Like, how is climate
Okay.
change going to impact Alachua County? What do we think is the most pressing impact? And I'm thinking, because I'm coming at this from a climate perspective, I'm thinking of this in terms of specifically climate change. You don't necessarily have to. Maybe the thing that strikes you is the fact that we have flooding of low-income communities, and that can tie back to, changes to rainfall, or, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be specifically this is how the climate is going to change according to the latest IPCC report, right?
Right.
That's how I'm thinking about it, but that's not necessarily how you have to think about it. Like, how is climate change going to impact this community? So it's looking at
Or how is it already impacting? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the reason I ask is because to me, it suggests that then the next step to that list of priorities is adaptation, right? So how do we reduce the adverse impacts by adapting? But there's going to be some mitigation solutions tangled in with that as well, right? So, okay.
Yeah, so the framing from the committee, or the feeling that I got, was that we really want to focus on resilience. And so resilience has a strong adaptation component, but we also all recognize the need to acknowledge and address head on the fact that it's emissions that are driving this climate change. So we need to do our part to reduce that. But the big focus seems to be on resilience, on adaptation. So that's where that framing came from.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Christine, your cat's adorable. Okay. So if there's not any more questions or comments, I guess we can leave it at that. And you guys ponder on the idea of framing it based on impacts. I feel like if there are any concerns, we can talk about it at the next meeting. Nothing is solid right now. I see Noah and then Forrest.
I just want to say, I think there's a natural advantage to the approach that you're suggesting, in that by identifying the outcomes, maybe, or the impact, the negative impact, or however you want to talk about it, you're kind of answering your own question in terms of how you would engage people to be on board with that too, right? Because that would be why we would be taking then to go where Jennison was going, the next step, how we would be addressing it. Like, that's why the answer is already in the kind of, does that make sense? I don't know. Anyway, I just want to appreciate that as a built-in thing.
Thank you. First, Christine had her hand up again. Do you want to go first, or do you want to let her go first?
Go ahead, Christine.
Sorry.
All right, Christine, you're up.
Technical difficulties. No, I just wanted, building on what Megan, you were saying, and Noah, it's that the impact is where we could be, like where we might be, and then we need to work backwards to figure out how we don't get there, or how we deal with it. So the where we might be, and then the solutions and the policies and the approaches that we need to take to solve it. I don't know if that was very articulate, but that's what I was thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys are already there, so I don't want to overcomplicate things, but just maybe a helpful way to sort of to think about these focus areas is, so we talked about transit. So transit and climate impacts to transit, if you think about it in a technical way, relatively easy, right? You know, there will be, for example, rising flood can impact a roadway to make it unusable. Now, we as a group can look at that, but truthfully, on the staff side, we have engineers that are looking at our infrastructure that can do that. Where you all can crack that nut open more and to be more helpful and look at it outside of the box is, yes, transit is going to be impacted in this way, but what, for one example, what are those transit connections? Is this connection that is impacted, does it lead to a neighborhood that is already disproportionately have, you know, less access to transportation options? So, you know, it may be, you know, an engineer will tell you that the roadway is impacted. You all may be telling the decision makers that the neighborhoods or the communities or certain demographics or areas are disproportionately affected by this impact to transit. So they'll be together.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
so what I just heard you say is that there's a impact, a physical impact, and then there's a people impact of that physical. And what we should concentrate on is the impact on the people side.
I
Yeah.
think that is where you all, where your expertise is going to be the most needed and the most used, but I don't want to say, you know, don't look at any physical impacts, because we may not have resources or staff on the technical side to look at those impacts either. So look at the impacts certainly, but I suspect that you are going to be bringing us into the more cultural understanding.
So yeah, I think that like the physical impact drives the people impact, right? So we are using the physical impact as a jumping off point and saying, how does this physical impact affect our community? And then what can we do about it? And so I think that there is, I mean, to Forrest's point, there are roles, like our technical team certainly has a role in maybe looking for impacts that maybe aren't on the radar of staff. Maybe they don't have the expertise for that. And also to be able to go, you know, yeah, just really deep dive into some of the literature that maybe they don't have the ability to do, or to listen to the communications group, and the communications group says, hey, like we're hearing this from the community. Can you tell us more about this, right? To have this sort of, you know, crosstalk, right? I mean, to Hannah's point earlier, it's not meant to be totally black and white. These groups are going to be working together. They're going to be playing off of each other. So to that end, for the teams, are we okay? Are we comfortable with the idea of moving forward with a communications group and then a technical advising group? Are we okay with breaking it up like that, at least initially? I mean, it may evolve into something else, but at least initially starting out with communications and then technical advising. All right, who wants to be on which team? So I know that Christine said she wants to be on communications. Megan, I'm assuming you're on communications. All right. Hannah.
Yeah, I'd like to be on communications as well.
Communications. John.
Outreach communication.
All right. How we got Jonathan?
Sorry, my dog wants to contribute, one of them. I'd really like to be on the communications, but I'm happy to fill the technical role, especially where it comes to like low impact development, green stormwater infrastructure, and then the economics of climate change. Those are the two technical areas I'd say I could help fill.
Thank you. Also, like, thank you for giving me like the areas that you feel like you have expertise in. Stephen.
Technical climate science and energy alternatives.
You're shocking me, Stephen. I really thought you were going to go for communications.
No, Megan's in charge. We were really lucky to have her. So
we are indeed.
Kick some butt and take some names, Megan. Yeah.
All right, Noah.
Yeah, I guess I'll I'll be part of the technical team, and it's funny because I don't necessarily think of myself in that way, but I feel like that's really what I am and relating to in the conversation a lot. So I think I spent a lot of my time in earlier years trying to communicate these ideas and really ended up more effectively trying to implement them. So I think that's maybe hopefully I'll be helpful in that way.
So I mean, I'm assuming agriculture is definitely in your wheelhouse. Are there other areas that you feel really strong in?
Yeah, I feel like looking at transit and development and kind of the planning, land use type questions.
All right.
Systems, distribution,
Pardon?
Sorry.
food systems, distribution.
Yeah, for sure. Just general resilient questions of resilience. I feel like are I love looking at that kind of thing.
All right, and I will throw myself on technical advising for climate science and weather, general sustainability, and then some energy and water. Definitely more of like the atmospheric science side of things.
And I didn't hear anyone else. I know there are others on the committee, but the housing side, like affordable housing and public housing, like that, put me down for that too, for the technical
Excellent.
side.
I guess I would maybe put add like construction and or buildings as something that I feel somewhat versed in. Be able to speak to that.
Excellent. Christine?
Are you calling on me because I'm supposed to talk about what I talk about, or?
No, because your hand is up.
Oh, it's still up. It's been up the whole time. I just haven't taken it down. Sorry.
Hannah, is your hand up like newly up?
Wait, me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to say too, if I can do a bit of like a double role as well, and help with technical stuff. I'd also love to work on housing. Very kind of some in some circles working with housing activists, renters' rights, things like that. And I'd love to work on that, and also would really be interested in providing input on like the language that we use in terms of net zero drawdown. That's my academic focus is on like the governance of carbon removal, and specifically like the language that we use to talk about it. So anything related to that, I'd really like to help out with as well. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm also, John, go ahead.
And I would like another area that we is food, and particularly food waste. I think that that's really, really important. And because my background is in food production, and so I'd like also to maybe be able to give some input into that, particularly the food waste side of it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Amanda told me that she would like to be a part of that as well, and she was not able to be at this meeting. She talked to me beforehand.
Right.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll put her down. I know that she has really broad interest and broad expertise in waste issues. So I'll put her down for that. And to the point, yeah, there will be crossover. So the folks who put themselves first in communications, like that will be your focus, but rest assured that if there's a question that comes up that involves any of the expertise that you mentioned here, that you're going to have the chance to use that we're going to want to draw on that information, that expertise from you. And the folks who are more strictly in technical advising will be focused on those technical aspects, but are going to be coming back to communications to say, hey, what have you heard about, XYZ issue? Okay, so
And I'll, just as a matter of practice too, for questions about specific topic areas, of course, for those of you that have identified you want to be the leads on those, I will go to you, but that does not mean that the rest of you won't see any of this information at all. I will continually update the entire group on the entire group's efforts. And that, of course, is going to be the main point of our bi-weekly meetings as well.
thank you. Yeah, so the last bullet on this item number 6 is established tasks for each team. So my thought was that for the next meeting, we go back and we come up with those top 5 priorities, right? And then we spend the next meeting, or each of us comes up with a top 3, and then we spend the next meeting coming up with the top 5 for the CCAC. And then for the following meeting, the one that comes 2 weeks after that, we'll talk to Forrest to see if we can do this. If we, I think at that point we could maybe spend that whole meeting talking about what the next tasks for each team will be. I think there's benefit in doing that as the whole group, so that we all hear what each team wants to work on. So for communications, like for that team, what do you all want to focus on? What do you all want to start out with? And then tech will be talking about what they want to start out with, and we'll make sure that those meet up, that those are supporting each other, that we're working together on those initial tasks to really kick it off. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, I think for now, certainly having both teams continue to meet together at the same time is only going to be beneficial for both teams for how they are getting their work done. Once we start rolling and everyone has an idea of what their focused tasks are, there will be less of a need to collaborate and coordinate. But until then, I think it'll be good for everyone to watch each other, how they're getting the job done.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's kind of my thought too. Does anybody have any comments on that before we move on? Yes. Okay, I see Christine and Jonathan in unison. So Christine, go ahead.
Mine should be quick. If you all wouldn't mind, after this meeting, just send out a summary email of our homework. Because I find that I'm like, yes, that's great, I can do that. And then it's a little bit later and I'm like, oh, shoot. So yeah, if you don't mind, just send a quick bullet of what we're supposed to be doing.
And that is going to be heavily on Brandy and I as we go through this, and there are more tasks that are rolling out. It's going to be our main task to make sure that we're keeping those action items and task lists, at the forefront.
All right, Jonathan and then Noah.
In the spirit of the sense of urgency we have and efficiency, while we're talking about the framing, I wanted to throw this to the communications team. So I have a student who's been working with me who just got a fellowship as a diversity outreach coordinator, or a diversity outreach fellow for the Citizens Climate Lobby. So she's working nationally, and her capstone project, she's actually looking at this term resilience and how among the BIPOC communities, it has a lot of adverse connotations, and there's this whole movement toward anti-resilience and building anti-resilience. So I wanted to plant this seed. There's a Harvard scholar who did her PhD. It looks like Megan might be familiar with this person.
No, I would just love to hear about the research. I think that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'll share the link to this report that she's delving deeply into for her capstone project, but just put it out there. That's all.
Thanks, Jonathan. Noah?
Okay, sorry. I guess I was just gonna say along the same lines as what Christine was saying. I'm terrible at like finding information in my email world. It's so I mean, I'm sure that's on me, but I feel like I just had the thought, and you can shoot it down right away. Maybe this is anti-sunshine something, but is there a possibility for like text messages about that just includes yeah, say meeting, link, or what Christine was saying, our homework list, or I don't know, things like that. Is that something we're allowed to do, or?
Maybe not text, but what I plan to do is following these meetings as quickly as possible, sending the minutes and the action item notes out to you all. I'm talking the next day or, 2 days after each of these meetings, so that when you all are sitting down in your free time, figuring out what you're trying to do, you'll be able to look at that notes and those documents and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other comment before we move on to public comment? Any other thoughts from the committee? Nope, seeing none. All right, Forrest, will you open it up for public comment, please?
I have some members of the public that made it through before our event. So I see a couple of them here. If they would like to speak, if you'll raise your hand, then I can unmute you and let you speak. I see Bob Tanzig, who has joined us before, David Moritz, who's the EPAC chair, he's joined us before. Don't feel like you have to speak. And I also see Nancy Darren, who has joined us a couple of times as well and has provided us with several great resources too. But it looks like there are no hands.
Right here.
Oh, I think David has one. David, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a couple of observations. First of all, I think Forrest's observations on how this board should proceed were just absolutely excellent way back at the beginning of the meeting. And I think that the community is extremely fortunate to have you guys on this committee. It's just a very powerful team here. My observations are, first of all, probably the most important one is, do not underestimate your ability to forge policy or to help to forge policy as a commission or a committee. You have the ability, I think, to make recommendations to the county and the city commissions that they will take very, very seriously, and never doubt that fact. And also, if you need money for some project, ask for it. All they can do is say no. They can't punish you for asking. Okay. And the other observation I have, which is also maybe a cynical of me, is that I think if you've done your job, that there aren't too many that are going to like the plan that you come up with, especially based upon the finances of it. Another thing to consider is, if you're talking about mass transit specifically, consider the fact that things like COVID is going to be around for a few years now. I mean, it's not something that's going to be over, in June or even next September. It's going to be around for a couple of years. And as long as it's around, people aren't going to want to ride mass transit as much as they used to. So you probably need to have fallback ways, getting people to get together to drive, or other ways, or consider that. I mean, that's up to you guys to consider ways to solve that problem. But, you need to make all the recommendations you can and find all the things that can not just the solutions to the problems, but the nice ways to present it to people. But I'm kind of in Hannah's court, in which she said, that she's a stick person and not a carrot person. I don't think there's a carrot big enough and tasty enough to get people to go along with what we need to do for climate change. It's just too huge. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? I see Nancy and Bob both have their hands up. So Nancy, please go ahead.
Hi, great meeting, except for whatever that was. Oh my gosh, I've heard of those. So I'm curious, is there any, should there be any vague awareness or consideration of federal policy, or especially federal policy, because there's some pretty interesting bills and executive orders and a lot of things beginning to happen at the federal level. But one thing in particular I'm thinking about is a national infrastructure bank, but there are a lot of state pushes now for a public bank, which would provide this would resolve a lot of the financial challenges. And the public banking folks have told me that our county is large enough that we could support a public bank, and they come in different flavors. And I've got info that I could convey if that's something. I don't want to just clutter you guys either. So that, and then something that's coming up in multiple committees or meetings that I'm hearing and reading that I do, we really need to look at how and what we measure, and that traditional ways we've measured success or financial costs like net present value and stuff, they're completely inappropriate for the task ahead. So the city actually today, and I know the county is looking at how do we begin to incorporate or develop a genuine progress indicator, measures of social indicators of health or measures of well-being. And there are places that have been doing this for quite a while now, and it changes so much about what you decide for procurement or development or all these policies. And there are now templates or examples of that I'm happy to provide everything I can. Nova Scotia, the state of Vermont, state of Maryland, city of Santa Monica, just as a few examples.
Thank you, Nancy. If you can send the information on the public bank, and then on what you just mentioned on sort of these other measures of, non-financial measures of success to Forrest, that would be great. And then he can pass them on to us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Bob, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, my connection was kind of going in and out all night, so I'm not sure what I missed, but I enjoyed your conversation about the structure. I thought it's a great idea to talk about the impacts, because clearly that's what's going to engage people the most. They may argue about what the causes are, but people are going to be pretty surely interested in what the possible impacts could be. But I'm a little concerned that by focusing on just the impacts and how we might adapt to them, that we do lose focus on what our opportunities are to try and reduce what those possible impacts might be. So again, I know you've talked about mitigation, reducing emissions, addressing the causes of what is, bringing these impacts to, fall on our heads. So maybe that would be in that last chapter you talked about, or I would certainly encourage, that you don't give up hope that we can't do something to reduce what these terrible impacts might be. And that's really, I think, the opportunity we have now to act in the meantime. So hopefully these impacts, a lot of them can be avoided. Now, clearly they can't all be avoided. There's already climate change baked into the atmosphere, as they say. And so we do have to adapt, but let's see what we can do to, to make it not quite so terrible. And then just going again on what Nancy just said, is that there's certainly things that we can do here locally. We have to do what we can locally, but also I think if even if it's just a resolution or something, a sense of the commissions that are in support of some kind of federal legislation. Obviously, it's a global problem and we need a global response. And certainly anything that they can do, to lobby, even state of Florida and Washington would I think they might listen to the committee. We've had different groups in the community that have been advocating for things like that, and the city's passed some goals and adopted the climate emergency resolution. So they're certainly aware of it, but we need to get more response from higher levels of government. And also, I liked what that conversation was about involving the drawdown people, because you know, that is where we're going to be able to reduce some of these impacts that have been forecasted. Is that certainly we have to reduce our emissions. You know, net zero to me is a step along the way, and that's really what the drawdown is all about. Is that they know that to stabilize our climate again and get back to where we need to be, we're going to have to reduce emissions, you know, not just below a certain level from the past, but to where it's net zero and then net negative, you know, where we are starting to draw down carbon dioxide and put it back in the soil where it belongs. So I'm certainly encouraged by the conversation and wish you all the best of luck. And I'm going to try and resolve some of my technical difficulties. I'm not quite sure what I have to do, but maybe I'll actually show up. I guess, Forrest, you're actually meeting in the conference room there at the office. I might try to stop in sometime and just be there in person. Unfortunately, I was a little late tonight, but thank you very much. I understand this is being recorded. Is that a recording that's going to be available to the public? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I'll have to review it more closely. And then I'll just to end, I know I have your email now. I was just wondering if I send an email to that, do all the members of the committee have access to that account and review it, or does it go to Forrest and then you pass them along, or how does that work? I'm thinking more of written response might be better for me.
I think you're probably talking about the climate change email address.
Yes.
To me, it also goes to Stacy Greco, my supervisor, and it goes to the director of EPD, Stephen Hofstetter.
Okay.
So that one is that one goes to the, you know, it's a 3-alarm fire when you use that email for climate change.
Well, I'd be interested in communicating with the individual members of the committee though as well. I don't know how to do that.
You can do that on a one-on-one, on an individual level, but through the committee, it has to be, you know, one-on-one, you and one other committee person for each of those conversations. If you have something you would like to share with everyone, go ahead and send it to me, and then I send it to the whole group.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And again, I appreciate all you guys' hard work on this. I know it's hard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. And just so you know, we have not given up on emissions. So yes, that was going to be part of what I consider to be the last chapter, but that's actually going to be baked into all of, for every sort of action or solution that we look at, we're going to be kind of grading it or rating it on its emissions reduction potential as well. So that's going to be part of everything that we look at. And then ultimately it's also going to be, a larger goal where we look at emissions reduction specifically as emissions reduction and look at what we can do to bring our own local emissions down. So we definitely have not given up. I don't see any additional members of the public with their hands up. So with that, I will close public comment. I'll bring it back to the board. So the suggested items for the next regular meeting, that was going to be for us to please each of us come up with what we consider to be our top 3 priorities, the things that we need to address immediately. So those, I had mentioned basing it on specifically on a climate change impact. That's how my mind works. If you want to look at more of a specific impact on people that is driven by a climate impact, then you can look at it that way. But just for each one of us is going to come to the meeting with our top 3, and then as a group, we're going to, at the next meeting, whittle that down to the top 5 that we're going to charge forward on, and that's going to be our first. That's going to be the first thing that we attack and we tackle as a group. So before we look for a motion to adjourn, do we have any other comments from the board? Forrest, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just another a couple of items to run past you all to think about for maybe next meeting or a subsequent meeting. So there's been work on the zero waste front. Of course, Amanda had a fair amount of events last week, so it may be good to do a update on the zero waste. And then also we have started to put together an IT team, at least on the county side, to start doing some of those web-based communication tools or tech approaches. So something that they need from you all is, what do you want to see on something like a dashboard? That's going to be the very first thing. So for a dashboard, a good example is right now the county has one for COVID. If you go to the county's website, it's the first thing that pops up. If you click on that, it has a whole host of different data points organized in different ways. Our IT has said that they are ready, willing, and able to prop up something very similar for climate change. They need to know what kind of data you all think should be a part of that. So start thinking about that, and you can get back on that to me. I think those are my main other ones.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so I guess on our next meeting, we'll have I guess our homework is going to be those personal, what we consider our top 3 priorities, and then to also be thinking about on the climate dashboard, please come to the meeting with the data that you want to see on the dashboard. And we'll also have a conversation about that. And then, and then get the zero waste update. So those will be our three topics for next meeting.
And if you get any ideas, in between now and the next meeting about that data, go ahead and send them to me. Don't feel like you have to wait. I'll go ahead and put it in front of our IT guys, and we'll start kicking it around.
Sounds good. All right, any other comments from the committee members before we wrap up? Everybody's ready for bed. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll see you all again in 2 weeks' time, and Forrest or Brandy will send out an email within the next day, reminding of us of our homework. So thank you very much. I'm super excited. I feel like we actually have momentum going, and I'm excited to see what we're able to do. So until next time, good night.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.